What is up, everybody? Welcome to the Couple on Fire podcast. Boy, do we have a treat for you today. We like doing the excited things like that. It's so fun.
It is.
Today's episode, we actually get to have the honor of interviewing the grand poobah of Christian Step Family and Blended Family Ministries, and his name is Ron Deal. And that's going to be coming up
Right now.
right now. Thank you so much for joining us on the Couple on Fire podcast. This podcast is for couples, for marriages, and for families within the Christian community. We exist to help break the stigma that happens within the Christian community. We're talking about divorce, we're talking about addiction, and we're talking about so much more. We believe that all this is possible in this life strictly based on the power of Jesus Christ and his ability to restore us fully. Let's dive in. So everybody, I would like to welcome Ron Deal to the show today. Welcome, Ron.
Hey guys, great to be with you. Thanks for having me on your podcast.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for being here. You know, the wonderful thing, we've been building up a little bit about this, and a lot of people don't know who Ron Deal actually is. And we do have quite a few listeners, and we have a lot of listeners that understand our background about being part of a blended family. But do us a little favor and kind of give us a snapshot, a little window looking into who Ron Deal is.
Well, man, I'm the odd duck. So, you guys are the real experts because you're living this life. I am an outsider looking in, trying to offer a little guidance. My wife tells me I'm the male obstetrician of the step family world. Now, any of the women out there who had a child with a male obstetrician, you understand what I just said. And the men are still trying to figure it out. But what that means is we had 3 boys, all with male obstetricians. Like you would think, why would we even bother going to a man? He doesn't know what it's like to carry a child. Well, he does understand a little something about the process. And that's what I do. I didn't grow up in a blended family. I don't live in a blended family now, but as God would have it, I've spent the last 28 years of my family ministry career focusing in on the blended family journey and experience. And so I've just been blessed to come alongside other people and, kind of build some momentum and some resources for churches. And, at this point, I run the largest ministry for blended families in the world. So it's a thrill to meet you guys. Love what you're doing. We need tons more people like you out there. So go get them.
Yeah, that's a wonderful thing. So, Christy, why don't you go ahead and kick off with the first question that we have for Ron today?
Yeah. So how do you think how it played out that God led you? Because I'm sure it transpired over time that you
Yes.
ended up counseling specifically that niche, the blended families within the Christian community.
Well, first of all, let me just say my heart is for families, period. My first job, I was a youth minister. And I spent 5 years working with teenagers and figured out real fast I didn't understand enough about family and family systems to really be able to help kids. So I went back to graduate school, got a degree in marriage and family therapy. But the whole time I was thinking, how does this translate into local church ministry equipping of couples and families of all shapes and sizes? And I came out with some really good clinical training about step families. Well, when I went back into local church work, I thought, we're doing marriage enrichment, we're doing parent training. We ought to do single parent ministry. We ought to help people transitioning in and out of divorce. We ought to help people in recovery. We ought to help people in blended families. I was just naive enough to think that the local church could handle all of that. And I got to tell you, we, was involved with a couple of churches that did some great things. And we really had a dynamic family ministry that was very comprehensive. And it was in the middle of that I discovered the benefits of small groups for blended family couples, for example. And how do you do the politics of church in order to have a blended family ministry? And it was just at a time when hardly anybody was really writing about this in the family ministry field. And so I found myself in the mid 1990s beginning to write and speak about this. And before you knew it, it took over my life. And what I mean by that was I loved seeing lives changed. And it turns out there was just hardly anybody trying to think about this from a Christian ministry standpoint. And I found myself in the middle of that space. So I just trusted God with the journey. And here we are now 25 years later. So that's pretty much it.
Yeah, so it's funny when because I'm on staff. It's a small portion at a church, a local church, and we have about 500 or 600 people that go to this church, and it's really funny to see the inner workings and dynamics of ministry when it
Mm.
comes to, like, we want to make sure that we're able to help as healthy as we can as a church, help people, in the best way that we're capable of doing, and it's
Mhm.
amazing to see how the blended or step families are really kind of an afterthought. It's really not even really thought of, right? A
Yeah.
lot of times you're like, I remember we talked to Christy's sister one time. We said something about blended families and step families and stuff. She's like, well, we don't have anybody in our church that says anything, that there's anything wrong with that. And it's amazing to
Mhm.
say,
Yeah.
well, there is, trust me, because we are one and we get it. But it's
Yeah.
almost an afterthought. So it's really interesting to see how God has really led you into an area
Yeah.
that has just, I mean, it's like it's just blooming in a lot of ways. Like you said, there's so much need for people to really get involved in this. So it's pretty
Yeah,
awesome.
Yeah.
and I read your book, and I recently read it just within the last couple months. And now our kids are 24, 19, 18, and 17. And we got together when they were 14, 9, 8, and 6. And I'm like,
Mm.
man, I wish I would have had this book back then because
Mm.
man, we did so many things the hard way. And I wish that we would have known about because and it's all true. Like we've all done it, we've been through it. And then I listened to your book. I'm like, yes, yes. I wish I would have known it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I appreciate that. And here's the thing. For years, people complained to me that there's just no Christian resources for step families.
Mhm.
And it was true, but it's not true anymore. Family Life, we have put out in the last 2 years more resources than the entire Christian community did in the 20 years previous to that.
Mhm.
We're rocking and rolling. We got a podcast just like you guys do. We have live stream events. Every April, we do a live stream worldwide event. We already have people registered from Chile, Argentina, UK, and Australia, and where else? A few other, Colombia, for this year's event. And we're bringing church leaders together every fall. We do a summit on step family ministry where we're equipping leaders like you guys and others to lead lay groups, but also to help pastors and youth workers understand. And Josh, back to your point about, well, we don't have any blended families in our church. And I think there's a number of reasons why the church has struggled to step into this arena. Some of them are very innocent. A couple of them are theological. When I say innocent, what I mean by that is I think a lot of times pastors are just not quite in touch, especially larger congregations. They just don't really know the backstories of the people who are walking in the door.
Mhm.
And I do think it's possible that some churches, quote, don't have any step families in their church because of the way they carry themselves as a congregation. No step family would want to go to that church. There's quite a bit of judgment and shame that can be communicated from the pulpit without pastors even realizing they're doing it.
Mm.
And so I think sometimes that's true. It's more often not true. Most of the churches that I'm speaking at these days are telling me that 40 to 50% of their congregation has some sort of step complex family dynamic going on in the mix. And that brings about another thing, the way we define step family. A lot of pastors just assume this is a marriage, divorce, and remarriage story. Well, I got news for you. There is post-death blended families, and that is on the rise because we're living longer. And so we are hearing from lots and lots of people over the age of 65 getting married and forming 3 generations of step in their family story. And the other one, Josh and Christy, that I think you'll be really interested in, a new stat just came out 2 months ago that I'm sharing with everybody I can. 15%, you ready for this? 15% of first marriages in the US today form blended families. Has nothing to
Wow.
do with divorce or the death of a spouse. It has to do with out of wedlock pregnancy, a marriage to somebody who's not the biological parent. It's a first marriage for both husband and wife, but it's a blended family. If your definition of blended is narrow, then you're not seeing the complete picture.
Yeah.
And you're not thinking generationally. Here's the last perspective I would give your listeners is help your pastors to think generationally. It may be that you're not in a blended family, but you grew up in one. And so you have step parent and biological parent, and your children have step grandparent.
Mhm.
So it's not always just the blended family or the step parent that's a part of your church. It could be one of the 3 generations that is a part of your congregation. Now, when you start counting those numbers, that's a third of every man, woman, and child in the United States. Let me say that again. One third of every man, woman, and child in the US has a step relationship. All of a sudden, this is not something that the church doesn't have to deal with because it's not us. Oh, it's us. And it is definitely your community. And if you're going to do outreach or care about the people in your neighborhood, you're going to have to know something about this.
Yeah.
So let me ask you this, Ron. So over your years, and you do a lot of, you come up with a lot of your own studies, your own statistics. You do a lot of your own stuff, which I so appreciate. I love on your website where it says, this is what they say. Well, this isn't actually, there's nothing to support what they say. So it's something that, so over the years, would you say that we're at a time and period in our life where you feel like maybe this is slowing down, blended families, getting worse or getting better?
Oh, it's speeding up. It's going to be an increasing demographic in our country and around the world. I mean, we're hearing from lots of other countries, their divorce rate's a little bit behind ours, but it's on the way there. Even China is beginning to take notice of this. The government in China is taking note. They want family stability. So they're trying to figure out how to prevent divorce and help families. Isn't that interesting? So it's speeding up. And I don't think it's going away, in part because the larger narrative about marriage, people cohabiting as opposed to just getting married, which produces more out of wedlock children. You can see where that rolls down the hill. So it's something we have to pay attention to, I think. Here's a little perspective. 50 years ago, when the very first church, I believe it was a Presbyterian church in Colorado Springs, held the first organized divorce recovery workshop. Okay. I think my dad is good there. Can you imagine what the other churches in that neck of the woods said about that church? Well, my goodness, they're giving approval to divorce, which is not the point at all, right? They're just ministering to people in a time of need, but nobody was doing it. And they were the first. Not much later, somebody did a celebrate recovery sort of thing with addicts and people who were struggling with difficulties. And they said, the church is a good place for people who are dealing with hard things in life and they're trying to break free of these strongholds. Well, the first person who did that, it didn't go over well. I can guarantee it, because that almost sounds like, well, we're just letting anybody in the church these days, And I'm like, amen. Let's let anybody in. Let's not judge them. Let's bring them in. The sick need a hospital is what Jesus said. So the first time somebody did step family ministry, it's a little bit off the radar and nobody really understands what it's about and what it means. But I'm here to tell you, in about 40 years, this is going to be a very common ministry in local churches across the United States.
And I think for preventative reasons, even when we talk about disease in general, it's the number one way to combat it is education and prevention. And the last thing that Christy and I want is for our children, which are part of a blended family, to then go on and have a blended family of their own, right? We don't want that. It comes with very special struggles, which you've learned over the years. It's not, I don't wish it upon anybody, and I understand, we live with our own sins and we have to deal with the things with our own mistakes. And these are the things we've had to deal with, but prevention and just allowing the world to understand better. And I think the church, as you, eloquently said, sometimes has a poor way of allowing the church to tell the people around them that it's okay. Because Christy and I run a Celebrate Recovery at our local church. We understand, we come from that world, right? So we understand it. And even then it's still a little taboo at times. And healing is never taboo. We want to make sure that if we get proper healing within our church, we have healthy people and we can go on, we can go produce healthy little ones as well.
Well, if anybody who ever gets confused, Celebrate Recovery does not celebrate addiction, right?
Right.
Celebrate Recovery celebrates grace, forgiveness, mercy, and recovery. Step family ministry, even for families and couples that divorced and they shouldn't have, it was a sinful choice in a first marriage relationship. Guess what? Now they find themselves in a blended family. Ministering to them does not celebrate divorce. It celebrates recovery. It celebrates what is, and it's helping them move forward at this season of their life as faithfully as they can. And by the way, Josh, for anybody who wonders generationally, is there any payoff to this? There's actually some research that suggests that children who grow up in stable, healthy step families as opposed to children who are growing up between two homes, mom and dad divorced, or grow up in an unhealthy blended family situation. Children in healthy blended families have a greater likelihood of choosing one partner for life when they become adults. They choose better partners and they have higher marital satisfaction in those first marriages. In other words, we can take back God's design for the home in one generation. And the mitigating influence to make that happen is a stable, healthy, blended family. It's not plan A, but plan B done well means we get more plan A.
Yeah.
That's so good.
Mm-hmm.
That's so good. You know what, when you over your time have noticed, you've counseled a lot of people in your time, and specifically blended families, if you had to pick the one massive issue, the singular, and I'm sure there's a lot, but if you had to think of the singular biggest issue that's within blended families, what is it? Why is it? And how is it that you help combat that with people?
Man, that's a great question. And I've wondered about that many, many times. And I really do have a hard time kind of narrowing this down to one thing. And really that speaks to maybe this is the one thing. There's not one thing. There's not one thing that you have to warn people about or help them be attuned to. There's multiple things. And depending upon the narrative of that blended family, whether it was post-death, post-divorce, are the adult parents who are divorced getting along well? Are they still at war with one? Like, there's so many different layers to what can cause stress in a blended family. So really the one thing is understanding what causes stress in your home and the expectations you have or that you came into the marriage with, like you were hoping everybody would love each other, but it's not happening. And now I feel like we've made a mistake. Like when the stress comes, it's somewhat normal and developmental. In order to create familyness, I like making up words, by the way. In order to create familyness, you have to have some struggle and strife and time together to figure out how we're going to fit and be a family. But if you give up on that, because you think stress is wrong or abnormal or this is a mistake, then you never get to the good stuff. That's the thing I tell people. Stress is going to be there for one reason or another. How you manage it is what makes a difference in the pace at which your family comes together and how thoroughly your family comes together. But at the end of the day, if there's one gift I would give the adults listening right now, your hope and expectation that everybody will get along is a good thing. Pursue that, chase it, pray about it. But you can't make a 16-year-old love anybody.
No.
Period.
No.
And so the more you try, the less it is likely that you get it. That's the paradox. It's learning how to see it for what it is, understand what that 16-year-old's wrestling with, come alongside them rather than be working against them, trying to force them into some love relationship they don't want to do. Come alongside them, walk with them, and then enjoy what you get. And that's not to say give up on hoping for more. That's simply to say today it is what it is. Tomorrow it can be a little better. But if you're constantly feeling like a failure and pushing this other people to get along so you don't feel like the family is a mistake, then all you do is make it worse. So it's recognizing that journey, settling into the journey, and getting as smart as you can about the journey so you manage it as well as you can.
Yeah. I like that. I like the analogy that you used in your book about the crock pot. I really liked that because that spoke to us. Like when we first got together, I think we tried to really focus on, we're all going to get along. And then over time we realized that didn't work, and we embraced the conflict, and it really, allowed things to just progress as they needed to progress, which, but it took us a long time to do it. But Josh and I both weren't Christ followers. We both believed in God before we got together, but we didn't live our lives for Christ like we do now. And when we got together and we started going to the church, like I say, we were baby Christians, you get all gung ho. Like, I'm going to read the Bible. I'm going to read through it. I'm going to get my devotional, and I'm going to read through the Bible in a year. And one of the first things that I started questioning when you were reading through the Bible is, okay, I'm going to be an adulterer for the rest of my life, when you get to that passage in the Bible. And God kind of led us into this ministry because that's one of the biggest questions we've gotten from our friends that are getting ready to get remarried, our friends that have gotten divorced, is they say, you know, how do you and Josh feel about your marriage? Because the Bible clearly states this, this, and this. And we've, you know, until we came across your material, we had to go with what we've experienced in our own life, what God has blessed our marriage with, and the fact that God forgives all sin. And sometimes you can feel like, as a blended family in the church community, that it is the one sin that's not forgivable. You know, like, yeah, he forgives you,
Yeah.
but you can't be allowed to be a leader in the church.
Mhm.
So that leads to the next question. What would you say to churches about how important offering tools for blended and step families are for them to have, the resources for them to have within the walls of the church?
Great question. I feel the need to just say something about your experience of going to be an adulterer the rest of your life. Let me just pull back because this is tied together to the question you're asking about churches. I want church leaders. We teach at our Summit on Step Family Ministry every year in the fall. We do an event somewhere around the country equipping leaders. There, we videotape and audio tape all the back years, and it's all available online. So, I mean, there's more than enough resource out there for people who want to learn. But one of the things I want them to see is you need to do your homework around the theology of marriage and divorce and remarriage, because of so many blended families do have that story to them. And you need to have a sense as a leader in your congregation, how your churches are going to handle that, because that will then inform the practice of the blended ministry, the scope of the ministry, what you will do, what kinds of activities you will not be involved in. I don't personally believe that anybody's living in a perpetual state of adultery. I do think people should not have gotten divorced, and there are people who should not have gotten married. But once you are, you is.
Yeah.
And you've now made a commitment and a covenant, and I'm going to help you live up to that. I do think even scripturally that present indicative in Matthew 19, you commits adultery is a one-time act. It is not an ongoing, everyday part of your life adulterous relationship. I don't believe that that's a good reading of the text. It's okay if leaders disagree. They just need to know what their stance is and then determine ministry based on that. That's really important for churches to do, step one, because until the pastor has a lot of confidence that this ministry is upholding the Bible the way we would want it to be upheld, they're not going to bless your ministry with budget or time or marketing from the from the pulpit or on the website. So you got to get that settled. All right. The next thing is to just, for church leaders to say, let's recognize this is a big part of our community. It is a portion of our congregation. And let's just begin to figure out simple ways that we can begin to minister and acknowledge blended families. When I say acknowledge, it can be as simple as the pastor in his marriage sermon noting that some people are in a blended family marriage and that there's some differences there. That could be a 10-second little acknowledgement, and he moves on. He may not even have anything of substance to say at that point. Or it could be on Mother's Day and Father's Day. Starting off Mother's Day by saying, hey, if you're a mom, we're so glad you're here. If you're a stepmom, if you're an uncle, if you're an aunt, if you're a grandmother, if you're a foster mother, if you're an adoptive mother, if you're just a volunteer in our children's ministry and you're living on kids that are not even yours, we want to thank you for who God made you to be. That simple acknowledgement that stepmothers exist. I have seen stepmoms come to tears in a worship service because they just heard the word from the pastor. It goes a long way. It's simple things like that that begin to say, you're welcome here. You belong here. We want you here. Now you can get down to the weeds and you can have small groups and you can have, fellowship meals and activities. And we've got churches that do retreats for families and blended families. Like you can run the gamut at that point of different specific ideas, but it starts with that basic acknowledgement.
So when you started out in your journey, and even today, I mean, do you find, okay, first off, we've recognized early on in the show that there's not enough of this going on in the local church, right? So my question to you is do you still feel like you get a ton of pushback from churches when you are trying to offer this as something to come into the church and give them and offer them as a resource?
Really, no. I mean, I work for a large international ministry, and I'm on the radio, a national radio broadcast on a regular basis. We have our own Family Life Blended podcast.
Love it.
Family Life is in 105 countries around the world. I don't get a lot of pushback. Now, it could be that those people just are not talking to me, right? It could be. Every once in a while, I get an email. But by and large, no, I think, and here's the thing I would say. It's not that pastors don't care. I think by and large, pastors just don't know what they don't know.
Right.
Let me tell you a quick story. This morning, I had a little eye infection. And so I texted an optometrist friend of mine and said, hey, let me send you a pic. Isn't that cool? I sent my friend a pic of my eye, this gunky kind of, and like, hey, do I need to see somebody? And my big question is, do I just need a regular doc or an optometrist? And the text comes back, oh no, you need to see an optometrist, because I've sent a lot of people I know have gone to their basic family practitioner and they didn't get the right treatment.
Mm-hmm.
All right, here it is. Churches often treat blended families like their biological families.
Mm-hmm.
They give the same advice to a stepdad that they give to dads. They give the same advice to a couple about parenting as they give to a first-time married couple raising their own children. And some of the advice is helpful, but many times it is the wrong treatment. It does not take into consideration the dynamics of the blended family. And so the people walk out with this false sense of security and the wrong answers. And then the stuff backfires on them.
Yep.
And they don't understand why, and the pastor doesn't understand why.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, when pastors come to get trained and when they learn, oh man, there's a whole lot that's going on under the surface in this family dynamic that I didn't understand, they do a better job of ministry. It's not that they don't care, they just didn't know what they didn't know. But once we raise their awareness, by and large, I find most pastors are more than willing to learn something so they do a better job in premarital counseling, or so that their children's ministry is actually sensitive to the fact that kids may be there one Sunday a month, and that has implications for that child as a part of that congregation. On and on it goes. They want to learn, and then they'll implement that wherever it is that they are able to.
Yeah, I love that.
Mm-hmm. So we've acknowledged this a little bit and Josh and I have been open with our children about it too, that God does not want divorce. Like once you get married, you need to stay married.
God can heal anything.
And God can heal anything.
Yes.
And it is a harder message to sell to your kids when you are living in a blended family. You've already been divorced and they see that as successful. So trying to explain to them, like, if you can follow the alignment of God's calling on your life from the beginning, your life's going to end up better, But how do you help blended step families that have divorced and now remarried overcome feeling like second-class Christians?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah, well, I think the biggest thing is just teaching grace. I mean, honestly, sometimes I get frustrated with somebody who pushes back with what we said earlier about, well, you're giving blessing to people's sinfulness and divorce. And hey, look, people who have gone through a divorce don't feel good about it.
Right.
I mean, they're not hooping and hollering over that. I think you have the wrong impression about what people want. They want their relationships to work. End of story. I've kind of suggested 99.9% of people who get divorced never wanted the divorce, even if they initiated it and walked out. They did that because they didn't know what else to do. This is not the plan. And by the way, for kids who grow up and seen mom and dad divorce and have now lived in a blended family, even if it is successful, if we could use that word, kids don't make that their script for their life. What they want is one marriage that lasts a lifetime. They more than anybody knows how complicated it is on somebody's life. So it's not like this is contagious. We're passing it generation to generation.
Yeah.
I think what we just need to understand is God is a God of second chances. He gives us grace for the day. And he's always about helping us be more than we were on our own. I mean, that is the story of what do the Pharisees complain about Jesus all the time? He's eating with tax collectors and sinners. Right. Right. These are the people for whom I have come. And I've often said to pastors, if you're going to shut the door on somebody just because of a particular sin in their background, then you might just stop worshiping God on Sunday morning, because you never know. Somebody might actually think they can be forgiven for what, they're doing in life. And the next thing you know, people are going to be coming in actually assuming that, there's grace for them. And then you're going to have a whole bunch of sinners in your church. And I know you don't want that.
Yeah.
By the way, a whole lot of sarcasm wrapped up.
Yeah. I think churches are afraid it's catchy, and I'm using that in a half-hearted sense, but I think it's true, right? So we think, well, if the divorced couple looks like their marriage is stronger than the people that's been married for 30 years, people are going to think, well, maybe I need to get divorced and find my right person, and I think that's a fear. Would you agree?
I would agree. I do. I kind of think there's this, well, if we let you teach fourth grade Bible class, even though you've been divorced and are married again, that somehow all the fourth graders are going to run out and want to get divorced when they get, it doesn't compute. Now, I want to be careful, because I do think the church should send strong messages about be like God, keep your covenant. That's the point of marriage. It tells the truth about God, and divorce does not tell the truth about God. So that's at the heart of that. God wants you to stay married thing, is to just be holy like he is holy. And so we ought to teach that. We ought to uphold that. We ought to encourage people toward that. But like Christ, receive them in mercy when they haven't been. Call them back. Call them to repentance. Oh my goodness, there's some people that should not teach fourth grade Bible class because they still haven't repented for what they did 2 marriages ago. Yeah, we need to help people grow up in the Lord. But when somebody has done that, when their life is now an example of a repentant heart, then by all means, put them in front of the church and say, let me tell you about these people and where they have been and where they have come and what the Lord has done in their life. And now this is why we're going to let them teach the fourth graders in our children's ministry, because they're going to be an example of God's grace. That's Ephesians 2, by the way. That is a different message. And the church, I think, can receive that and teach that one.
Yeah. So I saw on an interview you did a while ago, it may have been 5 to 8 years ago, but I saw that it was on a podcast, and you were telling the person that was hosting, you were let him know, you're like, there's a church that I know that the pastor was talking about. It may have been Mother's Day, but they invited 2 couples up on stage.
Yes.
And, they offered a different perspective from each, which I think is absolutely powerful. Even if they say the same thing, even if they say something different, but that opportunity of grace, like you're saying, right? So it's a fear, I believe, of most churches to put people up on stage, number one. But number 2 is to really show the congregation that, we're all aiming for the same source, right? We're all aiming towards a closer relationship with Christ, but we all have different journeys in doing that. And grace is what covers it. And I just love that.
And we would never, everybody that we talk about, I'm like, we've lived through it. We've had to share the holidays. We have to share birthdays. We would never encourage anyone to get divorced. Right. God doesn't want you to get divorced. I mean, divorce is hard. Being a blended family is hard. So everything that you can do to stay true to your marriage, you should do. Once you're out of it and you're remarried, you're there. And God can forgive it. And we need to work at it now with what we're doing.
I can now add you guys to my list of mature Christian couples that I've talked to who have been divorced in a blended family. Every single one of them has the perspective that says, no. I tell people, don't ever do this.
Yeah.
Stay in that first marriage. Nobody's encouraging you to just like when you have that perspective of maturity, you see the challenges that come with it, and you want something different for other people. Nobody's giving up on God's plan. In fact, we're promoting it bigger and stronger, I think, than others. And we believe in mercy.
Yeah. Yeah. So our last question, it's something that we always like to end interviews with. Our thing for our podcast is taking your faith, your family, and your future to the next level. But I want you to direct it towards blended family. If there's one piece of advice you could give the blended families that are on today, maybe there's somebody that hasn't remarried, maybe there's a single person, whoever it is that's part of a blended family. If you could give them something that could help them just take their faith, their family, their future to the next level, what would it be?
Yeah, I would repeat that principle. Get smart about this whole family dynamic. Learn as much as you can about it. That's why all my books, almost all of them, have smart in the title. The smart stepmom, smart stepdad, smart stepfamily. Because as you come to see, oh, this is what we're wrestling with. This is what I'm feeling. This is what my stepchild's feeling. you're now better informed to decide how to respond to that. As long as you're naive or in the blind about it, you're just guessing. And often, like a pastor who doesn't know any better, you're applying first family principles to a second family dynamic. And occasionally it'll help. Most of the time it backfires.
Yeah.
When you learn that stuff, it really makes a difference for you. Of course, walking with Jesus, of course, discipleship is way high at the top of the list because he teaches you what love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control looks like in a situation where a 17-year-old is saying, "You're not my mom. I don't have to do what you say." Like that's the reality of, wow, what does patience look like? What does gentleness look like in that moment? That, of course, is huge for anybody. But then understanding the background and dynamics behind that will help you make the next step as well.
Yeah, that's wonderful. Ron Deal, we want to thank you so much. It's really funny.
Yeah.
When we refer to you to people, we call you the grand poobah of
I say godfather. I'm like,
step
he's
families.
the godfather of Christian step families.
So, we appreciate it. God has done amazing things through you, and
Yeah.
thank you for allowing him to do so.
Yeah.
Families like ours are blessed because of it, and we know that it's not easy. I'm sure your journey has been interesting along the way, but thank you so much. If our people want to get in touch with you, if you want to direct our people to you somehow, in what way would you like them to come and contact you?
A couple of websites. Family Life is the organization that I work with. Familylife.com. Just click blended family and you're off and running. Familylife.com. And the other one, my personal website, is really a portal to everything I'm doing, live events that I'm doing, virtual classes that I'm teaching online. You can learn about all of that stuff in one place, and that is smartstepfamilies.com. Smartstepfamilies.com.
All right, we appreciate it. We know you got a brand new book coming up too, so make sure you guys get online, get on Amazon. You can pre-order it right now. I will make sure that I put a link down in the description. So thanks again, Ron. We really appreciate it.
Bye.
Thank you. God bless you guys.
Thank you. What an incredible interview that was. It's amazing sitting and being able to converse with somebody that has made their life work and study and counseling blended families, to be able to sit and really be able to just have conversation and listen to the wisdom that comes from him.
Oh my gosh.
It's reassuring for a
Yeah.
lot of things in our lives. It's been a rough journey, and I'm sure for many of you that we know that have blended families, it's a rough journey, but
it's just the beginning.
or it's just the beginning, but there's hope, and that's the beautiful thing, is there's hope, and God wants to bless the marriage you have today. God wants to honor him with the things that we do today, right now, and we can feel whole with that, even though it's really easy to feel like a second-class Christian, as someone that's been divorced, or, maybe you did have a child out of wedlock and then you got your first marriage. Maybe you are one of the 15%, but that's just not the truth. God loves us all equally, and we can honor him with what we have. So what an amazing interview.
I love him. I love him.
I love you, Ron.
Like, he is so wise, and he
is.
says things so well. You can tell that he's been doing it for a very long time. You can tell that he's in his sweet spot, the calling in his life. You can tell he loves the Lord. And he's just, everything that he says is done out of love. Like, he acknowledges and speaks truth on where the miss is in the church community.
Yep.
But he does so in love. And then the same with step families. Like, he wants to help step families and blended families come together, but he also acknowledges that, divorce is wrong. But that doesn't mean that you're an adulterer for the rest of your life, or that you are, going to hell for the rest of your life because of that. And I just really enjoyed his wisdom, a lot of it, his wisdom and discernment over his years of doing it.
It is. And so we have a copy of his book right here, which we're giving away this copy coming up on, I believe, the 6th of April. We're giving it away. And we'll let everybody know where we'll be giving that away, because we're giving away 2 free tickets to our event as well. That's coming up. So we're going to be giving away a copy of his book.
You can't have this if you're not going to the event.
That's the only way to get it.
I'm kidding.
But it's important, right? So Christy read this book from cover to cover. I started listening. She listened to it, but she wanted to buy a copy of it because it was so impactful
I want to
on
highlight
her
it
personally. And it's funny because she's, he'll sit and he'll start talking about, the way that stepmoms, are treated and the way that they're acknowledged or not acknowledged. And I can see my wife get teared up over stuff like that, because it's absolutely true. The recognition of the hard work that we put in, it's like we don't get any recognition. I mean, little as a stepfather, but even worse as a mother, a stepmother, because moms have this special innate motherly gift that God's given them, and they care for my child, someone else's child. They care and deeply love this child, but get zero of the recognition for it, or the zero reciprocation, of that. And it is so hard to do that. That's why community comes to be such a massive part of what's needed with blended step families, especially in the Christian community.
Well, and I don't think necessarily because moms have such a motherly instinct about it. I know, thinking back, a lot of my awkwardness on Mother's Day within churches was we would have our kids there with us. And since I have a motherly instinct and I do love his children and my children, when they just talk about mom, 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 I instantly feel about my stepkids how they feel. Like they're sitting there like, this is great. My mom's not here, And so it's like it just as an inclusivity. Is that a word?
Yeah.
Saying like stepmoms, if you're loving on your kids. I love that he said, if you're an adoptive mother, like it's, you need to take in, that's the thing with blended families. You have to take in the whole picture, and the whole picture is the kids too. How are these kids feeling that are there with a step parent or an adoptive parent? It's important to say those things. And it takes like 10 seconds, to say, even when he said, they might not even have anything of substance to say at that time, just mentioning it.
Yep.
And it does make a big difference. It does.
Yeah, like one of your superpowers, I think, in our family unit as a blended family is that Christy is very good about showering her love, verbally, physically, hugging, kissing, doing these things. But I'm telling you what, like, I love how Ron said something about like, you can want all you want for a 16-year-old kid. Doesn't mean you're going to get what you, in reverse, what you've put in. And I've watched that happen because I have an 18-year-old son, 19-year-old son now, and I've watched as we've grown for the last 10, 11 years. She's constantly looking at him and she's like, I love you, Joshua Michael. And he never says it back. He never does. But she doesn't stop doing it. But it impacts him and it lets him know, like, sometimes it becomes a thankless job. And to be completely honest with you, a lot of part of it is, but, it's important as parents that we bond together as a couple, number one, right? Mm-hmm. Under the covenant of God, right? We put God first, then our spouse, then our child. Mm-hmm. But next to that, it's like, we got to make sure that we're still pouring into the kids, even our stepkids, like, I love you, I care about you. And we don't turn it around and look at ourselves like, what am I getting out of this? And that's a really hard thing to do because it's easy to feel defeated in that. And I think that's your superpower in our blended unit.
Mm-hmm. I try. I grew up in a family where I wasn't told that I was loved. I love you wasn't something that was thrown around. Hugs weren't something that were given out. And you don't really realize it until you become older. And you really don't realize that if you're a broken adult and you're just not trying to do self-improvement, you're just wallowing around being a negative Nancy every day. But when you really start getting into self-improvement, you want to become better as a person, you really have to embrace healing. And you really have to embrace the things that you went through as a child and have a good heart about it. And be open to forgiveness, from people that maybe have never told you you're sorry. And when you start realizing, like, I really wasn't loved enough as a child. I wasn't wanted as a child. And I don't have hate in my heart now because of that. But I want to ensure that my kids never feel that way. Now, sometimes I go to the too extreme of it. Like, I don't punish my kids like I should or follow through on discipline like I should because I worry that my kids are never going to feel loved. And it's even magnified in a blended family because you don't want your kids to feel like, I don't want my kids to feel like I love him more than I love them because this isn't their dad, and we're blood. And so it comes with a little bit more higher level of guilt. So, but yeah, I want everyone to know that they're loved. Everyone. And I don't care if they think that I love them, like other strangers. I want them to know that God loves them. But our kids definitely, they need to know they're loved. They need to know that whatever happens in their life, they have somewhere that they can come that's safe.
That's why I think it's so important, though, that when we talk about blended families, right? And we're going to talk about this in depth at the conference. So I'll really encourage you, if you haven't had an opportunity yet to sign up, make sure you sign up for that. But I think it's really important that as a couple, that we make sure that we're supporting our spouse in the highest level possible, right? So I need my wife to know that she's completely supported and loved and cared for in all ways possible. Now, that doesn't mean that I need to make her think that she's right all of the time.
Or codependent.
Right, in a codependent sense, right? But it means that I support her, right? I love her openly, right? And we discuss things privately, right? I don't do it in front of my children. I make sure that my son and my daughter know that, and her two sons know how much I love her and how important she is to me. And I support her in that way. And that makes it easier for her as a woman to pour into my kids and her kids, even though she's not getting something back. And I know that's hard for moms. I know that it's hard. I mean, there isn't enough books written in reference to stepmothers. There's just not.
There is a lot more information, though. I did a paper recently for school on stepfamilies, and what I found, there isn't enough. There isn't, but there's hardly any for stepdads.
No, there's not. There's not much. But the reason why is you go wherever has the biggest scratch, right? Whatever it's the biggest itch, right? And let's just be honest, when it comes down to it, dads do struggle, right? We have our own things that we struggle with, but the moms,
it's harder.
It is brutal. And that's why it's so much more important that we focus on supporting her through that journey. You know, we're in it together. So,
and there is data to show that moms, it's harder.
It is harder, especially if there's a girl, a daughter of the man that comes into the show. And that's a book all on its own. That's a book all on its own. And that's a scary thing. But
yeah.
We want to thank everybody for being here. We want to thank Ron Deal for being part of this. He's a busy man. You know, we joke and we say he's the grandfather, the grand poobah. Godfather. But to be completely honest with you, he is the number one person in this space. He is the number one. He is the go-to person. He has put in the time and the energy, and he has laid his obedience down 1,000% in this direction. So it is an absolute honor to have him on, and we want to just openly thank him again for doing this with us today. So if you've had anything today that was good, you know, that you enjoyed, that was something that was helpful, do us a favor, share it out. Tag somebody. Maybe there's somebody out there that you think, you know what, could find something in this episode today as a nugget of wisdom and
a nugget.
And go back and listen to it. So we want to thank you guys for being here, and we'll see you guys next week.
Bye.